Under a sun that looked more like a punishment than a blessing, a young woman pushed a cart full of bricks through the dusty road that cut across the village of Mumba. Her shoulders glistened with sweat, her breath came in sharp bursts, and every step felt like dragging her own shadow uphill. That young woman was Amara Endier, barefoot, pregnant, exhausted, and still moving because stopping meant surrender. Children stopped playing to stare. Women at their doorsteps whispered behind their woven fans. Men in straw hats looked away, pretending not to see. In Mahamba, gossip traveled faster than the wind, and compassion was often buried under layers of judgment. To most of them, Amara wasn't just a struggling girl. She was a warning of what happens to women who defy the rules. Cursed, the market women said. Punished, added the ones who pretended to pity her. See what happens when you court shame, muttered the neighbor with the sharpest tongue. They all talked as if her life were a lesson meant to entertain them. But that morning would not end in whispers. It would end in something none of them expected, a single act of decency that would shake the dust off old griefs and stir two buried lives back into motion. Down the same sun-beaten road came a wooden cart pulled by a tired mule. Behind the reins sat Ilio Matola, the village farmer people called Fair, but only from afar. He lived alone on his field at the edge of Mamba, a man whose kindness had folded inward after too many losses. His late wife, Esther, had died years before, and what was left of his heart he kept sealed under a crust of silence. The mule's hooves clopped softly until Ilio tugged the reins and stopped. He had seen her before anyone else did, a figure bent double under a mountain of bricks and shame, sweat trickling down her temples, belly swollen forward like a sun-warmed stone. For a second the scene fused with memory. Another woman, younger, gentle-spoken, dying far too early because the same village that pitied her never dared to help. The image struck Ilio deep enough to make him climb down. The dust stuck to his boots. The air shimmered. He approached Amara slowly, like one approaching a wounded bird. "I can do it," Amara said without raising her head, voice trembling more from pride than fatigue. She gripped the cart until her knuckles whitened, bracing for the familiar sting of mockery. But none came. Instead, the farmer gently moved her hand aside. His own palm was calloused, cracked, steady. "It's not charity," he murmured. "It's humanity." The words broke through the air like shade breaking through heat. For a moment, even the mule seemed to pause, as if the road itself understood what had just happened. Amara's lips parted, but her throat felt tight. "Thank you," she whispered, the words barely reaching his ears, fragile, as though gratitude itself might bring her another debt. Ilio nodded once, a quiet man's way of saying everything that needed to be said. He steered the cart under the shade of a lonely mango tree, where the wind gave them a moment's mercy. From a dented canteen he poured water into her trembling hands. "Drink," he said. She hesitated, expecting a trick where there was none, then drank in slow sips. The water tasted of rust and kindness. For the first time in months, she felt seen. Ilio sat on the edge of the cart, eyes lost in the endless fields. "I lost my wife during a time of sharp tongues," he said at last. "They promised help but brought only judgment." The words came out heavy, as if ground from stones. Amara listened quietly, a hand over her belly. "They promised me love," she answered, "then took everything when I believed them." Her voice cracked, but she didn't lower her gaze. The wind seemed to hush. The fields fell silent, the crows frozen mid-cry. It was as if the land itself were listening to two wounds finding the courage to speak. Mamba was famous for its gossip, and infamous for its compassion. The villagers said news didn't travel. It grew, like a weed. In the square between barrels of cassava and baskets of mangoes, tongues sharpened stories into knives. Every week Amara's name was on their blades. They said her father, old Neva, had cast her out when her belly began to swell. "No daughter of mine brings disgrace into my house," he'd shouted before slamming the door on her cries. Since then she'd lived on scraps, washing at the river, hauling firewood, begging leftover rice from doorsteps that slammed in her face. The women whispered when she passed, "That's the cursed one, the big-bellied witch." She heard them all and kept walking. At night she'd lay on her mat with one hand over her belly, speaking softly into the darkness. "If the world has no place for you, little one, I'll make one. If I run out of strength, I'll use love instead." It was how she stayed alive, by promising something gentler to the life inside her, even when her own felt like a punishment. Work grew scarce when the rains failed. She took a job at Viter's brickyard, carrying loads that would have broken most men. The laborers mocked her. They bet on how long before she fainted. One day when the sun hammered down and her body trembled, she nearly did. The laughter rose like thunder around her. But instead of crying, she lifted her head and said through cracked lips, "Laugh all you want. Just don't forget, life turns." For a moment the laughter stopped, and shame slipped quietly between them. That defiance made her dangerous to their comfort. So they punished her more, with distance, with silence, with words. And now, there she was, under the same merciless sky, caught between the dusty path and a stranger's unexpected mercy. Elio looked at her cart full of bricks, then at the long road ahead. "How far are you going?" he asked. "As far as they'll let me," she said softly. "Not as a victim, just as truth." Without another word, he took the cart's handle again, leaned into the weight, and pushed. "Then let's go." It wasn't heroism that guided him. It was recognition, the kind that happens when two weary souls look at each other and see the same storm reflected back. Together they walked through the heart of Mamba, where voices rose from porches like flies around rot. Some laughed outright. Others muttered from behind half-closed shutters. But Ilio's eyes never left the road ahead. "My mother used to say," he murmured, "when the house is on fire, you don't argue about the smoke. You fetch water." Amara nodded, a faint smile ghosting her lips. For the first time in years, someone's words didn't sound like judgment. They sounded like shelter. They kept moving until the fields widened and the dust began to settle. At the edge of the farmlands, where the air smelled of dry maize and promise, Ilio stopped the cart. He reached into a blue cloth bundle and drew out a small loaf of bread. "Eat," he said, handing it to her. "Whoever carries two burdens needs two kinds of care. One for the body and one for the soul." Amara held the bread as if it were something far greater than food. A proof of existence, a quiet restoration of dignity. "May God repay you," she whispered. He nodded, adjusting his hat. The sun angled lower, gilding the sweat on his temples. He took the reins again and climbed back onto his cart. As he flicked them lightly, something inside his chest moved, the faint hum of gears rediscovering purpose. He looked back once. Amara was walking slowly down the path. Her cart lighter now, her steps steady, her shadow long but no longer lonely. The mule snorted. The wheels turned, and somewhere behind them, the gossip of Mahamba would begin again before sunset, repeating half-truths, sowing half-lies, humming its tired song. But Ilio Matola had already chosen his own, and when night fell, he knew what began as discomfort had really been a calling. Because some encounters are written by God in silence, and we understand them by the peace that lingers after the gesture. And it was with that peace that they rode off, not knowing that from that day on, he would no longer push just a cart of bricks, but an entire destiny that came along with it. The sun was beginning to slip behind the hills when Amara India saw the farmer again. He was approaching slowly, his cart creaking along the dirt road. The wind blew dust and memories, and though exhausted, Amara lifted her face, surprised. She hadn't expected to see him again since the day he'd taken the cart from her hands. Something inside her had stirred a mix of gratitude and fear. Gratitude for the help that had eased her pain, fear of pity, which often hides behind kindness, only to demand something later. Ilio stopped the cart by the roadside, his hat casting a shadow over his face. He watched as Amara filled the buckets at the well, her muscles tense, her round, heavy belly in front of her. The bucket slipped from her hands, and he stepped down without thinking. "Let me get that," he said, reaching out. Amara stepped back, her eyes weary, her body on high alert. "I don't need charity, sir." Her voice trembled like a branch about to snap. Ilio looked at her calmly without raising his tone. "It's not charity, it's humanity." The words came out steady, without pride, without disguised pity. And in that moment, time seemed to pause. Amara stood still, unsure how to respond. It had been a long time since anyone had spoken to her like that, with respect, with no hidden intentions. The silence between them grew heavy, and the sound of water falling into the well was like a relief. She bent down to pick up the bucket, and for an instant their hands touched. His rough skin met hers. Cold and trembling, Amara pulled back quickly, her heart skipping. "You don't understand," she murmured, avoiding his gaze. "Around here, when a man helps a woman like me, people already make up the rest." Ilio took a deep breath. "People talk even about the wind when it changes." Direction. If I cared about village gossip, I would have died of shame long ago without ever doing anything wrong. Then calmly, he took the bucket and poured the water into her basin. "Let them talk. Miss Evil needs an audience, kindness doesn't." Amara stood frozen, too unsure to reply. Deep down, those words struck a place in her chest where disbelief still lived. She had seen men approach with sweet words and rotten intentions. But there was something different about Elio. He didn't look at her body. He looked at her weariness, and that kind of gaze, she had forgotten it even existed, "Why are you doing this?" she asked, almost in a whisper. He looked straight at her. "Because my mother taught me that a woman's dignity is sacred, even when the world forgets it." Then he turned to climb back onto the cart. Before leaving, he placed a small sack of corn on the edge of the well. "If destiny is heavy, may your stomach not be too." As he rode away, Amara sat by the well. She ran her hand over her face and felt the salt of her own tears. She wept, not for the help, but for the reminder that there were still people who could see beyond appearances, beyond imposed shame. She closed her eyes and whispered a prayer. "Lord, if this man is good, protect him from harm. And if he's not, take him away before my heart believes." Up the road, Aileo looked ahead, but his thoughts stayed behind. The image of that woman alone pushing life forward with strength and faith wouldn't leave his mind. He didn't know why, but he felt that destiny wasn't done with that encounter. That night, Amara lay down with a light head and a heavy heart. His words, "It's not charity, it's humanity," echoed in the silence. It was a simple phrase, but it seemed to carry centuries of repair. For the first time in a long while, she didn't pray for her pain to end. She only prayed that the new day wouldn't steal the little hope that had begun to sprout. And so between resistance and fear, the first thread of trust was born, thin, fragile, but real. Because sometimes the greatest strength of a tired woman is allowing herself to believe again. And Amara, without even knowing it, had just taken the first step out of the shadow where the world had placed her. It didn't take long for the tongues of Mamba village to start flapping like dry leaves in the wind. All it took was for people to see farmer Aileo Mata helping Amara and Deer push a cart of bricks, and the villagers' imaginations caught fire at the market between cassava stands and baskets of corn. The rumor spread from mouth to mouth. "The farmer's lost his mind," said none deeper with a spiteful grin. "He's going to end up bewitched by that woman with a bad name." Others nodded, pretending to pity him but savoring. Every word of malice, Aileo pretended not to hear. When he passed through the square, the chatter paused for a second, then resumed lower, more poisonous. He already knew the nature of those voices. It was the same chorus that had once condemned his late wife Esther for not being able to bear him children. The same people who called other people's suffering divine justice. But now he didn't feel anger. He felt shame at realizing time had taught those people nothing. One morning when he arrived at the brickyard, he found Amara washing bricks, her body bent, her hands raw. He left a sack of flour and a piece of cloth on the wall. "For when there's none left," he said briefly. She looked around nervous. "You shouldn't, sir. People are already talking too much." He replied calmly. "Let them talk. The tongue of the people is like fire. It only burns what's dry. When you've got truth inside you, it doesn't catch." And he left before she could refuse. That afternoon, the whispers grew louder. He visits her. He brings her food. He's going to take her to the farm. Phrases that echoed like curses sown into the wind. Amara heard them all by the riverbank while washing other people's clothes. The laughter cut like blades. She tried to ignore it, but her heart ached. "I don't want to stay in the name of the man who helped me," she thought, staring at her tired reflection in the murky water. That night she couldn't sleep. The sound of crickets mingled with the voices of the village in her head. At dawn she decided to leave. She gathered what little she had, a change of clothes, a piece of stale bread, and a blanket, and wrapped it in a cloth. "Better to vanish than be the cause of someone else's disgrace," she murmured. Her belly was heavy, but the decision weighed even more. When she stepped out, the sky was still gray, and the air smelled of rain. She walked toward the edge of the road, only to find Abilio waiting there with his cart. He looked at the bundle in her hands and understood without needing to ask. "Running from what?" he asked, voice calm. Amara lowered her eyes. "From the tongues, sir. From the stones you can't see, but hurt just the same." He stood silent for a moment, then answered. "And who told you that running changes what they say? They'll keep talking just from farther away. Stay, Amara. What's clean doesn't fear the flood." His words came like shelter in the storm that had already begun to fall. The first raindrops dampened the dust and the cloth over her head. Aileo opened the cart and held out his hand. "Get in. The world's thrown you down enough already." She hesitated, looked at the path ahead, the same one that led to exile and oblivion, and with a tight chest, climbed aboard. The cart creaked. The mule moved forward, and the village voices were left behind, drowned in the sound of rain. Up the hill under heavy clouds, Non-Deepeper watched from the Porsche, arms crossed, the farmers getting involved with the shameful woman. She whispered to her husband, and like every venomous lie, the phrase grew wings and flew through the alleyways, multiplying until it started to sound like truth. But on that soaked road, Aileo heard nothing but the crack of the wheels and the wind rustling the leaves, and Amara huddled in the cart felt something new. Not peace yet, but not fear either. It was the sense that maybe for the first time someone was willing to believe in her without demanding explanations. The people in their rush to judge didn't know while they were spreading gossip. Destiny was stitching a thread of hope between two scarred hearts. Because when malice is busy pointing fingers, quiet kindness is busy changing fates. And so it was beneath the murmur of rumors and the scent of rain that the first flicker of redemption began to take root. The rain from the day before had left the ground dark and soft as Ailio Mata's cart passed through the gate of the farm. The wind carried the scent of rich soil and crushed leaves. Amara Endiersat curled on the bench, hands resting on her belly, eyes scanning the horizon lined with cornfields. At the far end of the land, past the corral and an old fence, stood 2 mango trees, and between them a simple little house, whitewashed walls, a faded blue door, moss-covered tiles. Ailio nodded toward it with his chin without ceremony. "It's there." The cart stopped, the mule flicked its ears, and for a moment, all that could be heard was the dripping from the gutters. Ailio got down, first opened the door to the house, and waited like someone clearing a path for forgotten dignity. "No pregnant woman should sleep on the street," he said with the kind of certainty usually reserved for truths like sky is sky and rain is rain. Amara entered slowly, heart tight. Inside was a wooden cot, a small stove, an iron pot, and a stool. Nothing more, and yet it felt like so much. On the wall, a modest crucifix. On the stove, a blue cloth covered a plate of boiled cassava. "Eat it hot," said Ailio, placing a fresh clay jug of water beside it. Hunger doesn't wait for explanations. Amara sat down, legs trembling, and brought the first pizza to her mouth. The simple taste of cassava, salt, fire, and care untied an old knot in her throat. She chewed slowly, like someone relearning a childhood gesture. "Thank you," she whispered, eyes still lowered. Dot. Outside, Donna Selina's voice arrived like the morning itself. "Ah, so this is where the miracle will live." A middle-aged midwife with small hands and deep wisdom. Selina laid a bundle of rue leaves and a handful of coarse salt on the table to ward off fright and foul tongues. Amara tried to rise, but Selina stopped her with a gentle glance. "Sit, my child. A woman carrying 2 weights doesn't have to prove her strength to anyone." Ailio listened in silence, grateful for a presence that could speak the words he couldn't find. While the stove crackled, the wind carried away the village's scent and brought in the aroma of green oranges from the yard. Amara took a deep breath. There was a kind of silence there that didn't judge, a clean silence, country silence, bird silence. Ailio picked up some tools, leaning against the wall, and began fixing the window that kept slamming. Each hammer strike brought order back to the space as if the house was slowly waking up. "That tile leaks, but I'll fix it this week," he said. "It's not necessary, sir," she replied out of habit. He gave a small smile. "Yes, Itis. A pregnant woman's house doesn't go with leaky roofs." By late afternoon, sunlight crossed through the window, casting a golden stripe across the floor. Amara laid out a cloth to dry, adjusted the cot, swept the doorway. Small gestures of someone recognizing shelter. Before, every corner of the world had been a place of passage. Now every corner of that little house seemed to speak her name. "It's strange, Mr. Abilu. I feel like no one here's pointing fingers at me." He leaned against the doorway, arms crossed, and simply replied, "Here. The only thing that points is the sun when it rises." When night arrived with its chorus of crickets, Amara could still hear the distant murmur of the village, a rumor that still wanted to reach her. She stroked her belly and spoke softly. "My child, tonight we have a roof." And as if performing a sacrament, she threw into the fire a pinch of the salt Selina had left. "May this house hold on to our name." Ailio outside checked the locks, and the sound of the bolt sliding into place felt to Amara like a promise. Later, already lying down, Amara felt her whole body remembering that rest was still a thing. The roof dripped far away, a soft rhythm, and the breeze slipped through the now-fixed window. On the table, the clay jug sweated. Inside it, water for a new beginning. Ailio blew out the lamp and stayed in the shadows a while, listening to the steady rhythm of her breathing. He thought of Esther, of the house that had known nothing but silence for years, and realized that this little place in the back now held new breath. It wasn't romance, nor performative charity. It was moral order being restored to the world. Before leaving, he rested his hand on the doorframe and spoke, almost like a vow. "As long as this gate is mine, your peace has an address." Amara didn't answer. She was asleep, hand over her belly, her face free of fear. The night settled over the farm like a blessing. And there, between old tiles and whitewashed walls, was born the first true home of a life that had known only roads and dust. 'Cause sometimes God doesn't send palaces. He sends a little house out back and a warm plate of food. And that's enough for dignity to finally say, "I'm home." The first night in the little house was full of silence and wind. Outside, the mango branches knocked against each other like someone whispering old prayers. Amaranda fell asleep late, her heart restless. Her body, so used to suspicion, still struggled to adjust to a peace that demanded nothing in return. But in the middle of the night, the tears came deep, soundless sobs, the kind that rise when the soul remembers all it's lost. She tried to hold it in, but the sobs escaped, climbing the walls of the house until they reached the attentive ears of Ilio Mata, still awake on the porch. He stood up, leaned against the wooden door, and listened, not daring to interrupt. It was the sound of a broken woman trying to piece herself back together in the dark. For a moment, he went back in time. He saw Esther, his late wife, sick in bed, her eyes begging for the understanding the world never gave her. He remembered how she, too, cried quietly, ashamed of being pied. The echo of that past mingled with the present, and Elio understood that there was something in Amara that connected him to everything he had tried to forget. The pain of injustice and the courage to endure it in silence. As the first light began to brighten the land, he knocked gently at the door. "Amara, imari some coffee. It's cold out here." She opened it, eyes swollen, her expression bare. She sat in front of the steaming mug and stayed quiet for a few minutes, stirring the liquid with a spoon. Then suddenly she spoke without looking at him. "The father of the child. He threw me out. Said his blood couldn't mix with mine. That I was ashamed." Her words were simple, but every syllable hurt. "I used to think love could heal. Mr. Elio, I found out some love only makes you sick." He listened without interrupting. Then in a steady voice he replied, "The mistake isn't in whole loves. It's in who uses love to hide their cowardice." Amara took a deep breath, trying to hold back her tears. "I lost my home, my name, everyone. I thought God had left me." Elio lowered his head. "Sometimes God goes quiet to see who keeps believing." The sun rose, painting the damp earth in gold. As she spoke, he realized how much rejection leaves invisible scars. Her hands trembled when they touched the cup. Her body hunched as if apologizing for existing. She was the reflection of so many women the world had taught to blame themselves for being deceived. Then with a simple gesture, he pushed the plate of bread toward her. "Eat. The hunger of the soul begins when we forget the taste of being cared for." Amara ate slowly through sobs. Each bite seemed to stitch a bit of her pain. "I don't understand why you're doing this. People will laugh at me and at you too." Ilio raised his eyes. "Let them laugh. I've gotten used to being the talk of the town when I choose to do what's right." After a long silence, he added, "My wife was rejected too. She had a heart too good for the small world she lived in. She died hearing people say she was cursed." He looked toward the horizon. "Life made me a widower and left me in silence. Now I see it was so I could learn how to listen." His words fell like soft rain. Amara wiped her face with a cloth and murmured, "Maybe God sent me here so someone could hear me without blaming me." Ilio nodded. "And maybe he sent you here to remind me that forgiveness still exists." Later, when he went out to the corral, the birdsong seemed clearer. The house, once hollow, now breathed in sync with two mended hearts. Amara washed the dishes, swept the floor, and when she opened the window, she saw the field bathed in light. She felt that though the past still hurt, the air no longer smelled of rejection, but of beginning. That night, before sleep, she took the rosary she kept around her neck. She ran her fingers over the beads and whispered a prayer that mixed gratitude with fear. "Lord, if there's still a place for me in this world, let it be where kindness lives." The wind slipped through the window and blew out the flame of the lamp like a sign in answer. And for the first time in a long while, Amara fell asleep without the weight of guilt. Outside, Ilio looked up at the starry sky and thought that maybe life really was a circle. One loses, another finds, one cries, another comforts. And when two of them cross paths in the middle, destiny calls it redemption. In that moment, he realized that it wasn't only Amara who needed shelter. He too was being saved slowly by the courage of a woman the whole village called lost. The days began to pass with the calm of someone relearning how to live. On the farm, time moved to a different rhythm. The rooster announced the morning, and the smell of fresh coffee mingled with the field's dewy air. Amar and Dyer now walked with more confidence, and Elio Mata, though still a man of few words, was starting to find joy in small conversations. Everything seemed to settle with the same care the farmer gave his seeds before harvest. No rush, but full of faith. One afternoon, while Amara washed clothes at the backyard basin, Ilio approached carrying a bucket of water. "The spring's dried up a bit. If you need, use the big well," he said, trying to hide his concern. Amara thanked him with a shy smile. He lingered a moment, watching the gentle way she hung the cloths on the line. "Feels like the house started breathing differently after you arrived," he said. She chuckled softly. "Maybe it's just the wind, sir." But inside she felt a warm, long-forgotten sensation, a sense of belonging. At night, They started having dinner together at first in silence. Then short conversations about the weather, the animals, the work. Slowly, the space between them began to soften. Elio spoke of how much he missed his wife Esther, and how the house had seemed to lose its voice after her passing. Amara listened with tenderness and respect, like someone who understands pain without needing the full story. Esther was good with the land, he said once, staring into the distance. She planted and harvested, like she was praying. When she left, the earth went quiet. Amara replied gently. The earth only falls silent when it loses someone who understands it. Maybe now it will speak again. Elio looked at her, surprised by the quiet wisdom of the woman the village had labeled accursed. It was curious. In such a short time, she had brought color back to his days and sound back to his mornings. As the weeks passed, their coexistence turned into routine. Elio taught her how to care for the newborn calves. She in turn planted herbs and flowers in the yard, bringing new life to the place. Sometimes in the late afternoon, they sat under the mango tree, each with their own thoughts, while the sun painted the sky in shades of copper. It was a good silence, the kind shared by those who no longer feel the need to prove anything. One night, during one of those quiet talks under the stars, Amara spoke of a fear that still lingered. I'm afraid of what comes next, sir. When the baby's born, everything could change. He turned to her. Change how? She sighed. Maybe you'll get tired of defending me. Maybe the village will come to take away the little I have left. Ilya went quiet for a moment, then answered slowly. The village doesn't decide fate. Amara character does. She smiled, looking up at the sky. You speak like someone who learned through pain. He nodded. It was the only teacher I had. They stayed like that for a while until a beam of moonlight lit up the medallion she wore around her neck, the same one that had once belonged to his wife. Though neither of them yet knew the connection, Ilya noticed the gleam but said nothing. He tucked the image away in his mind, like recognizing something without understanding why. The next morning, as Amara swept the yard, Aelio appeared holding a small rose bush planted near the window. He suggested, flowers like light, and Soto people. She smiled, and that simple gesture sealed a kind of understanding that needed no promises. The trust between them grew like a stubborn plant, pushing through the hard soil of old fears. The land, once marked by silence and memories, now smelled of baking bread and sun-dried laundry. Even the animals seemed calmer, as if they too sensed that the house had finally become a home again. One afternoon, Donner Selina, the midwife, showed up. Unannounced, she sat in the shade and commented with knowing eyes. This land looks better. I believe seems like sadness dried up. He pretended not to understand, but the flush in his face gave him away. Sadness doesn't dry up. Selina, it just moves to another corner. She laughed. Well, then that corner is sweeter now. Amara heard their exchange from inside the house and smiled quietly. She knew the heart. When it begins to heal, sing softly so as not to scare hope away. And on that simple farm where two wounded lives had crossed paths, love didn't yet have a name, but it had taken shape. It was made of respect, of faith, and of a gentle care that time recognizes as a blessing. Because sometimes love doesn't arrive with fireworks or promises. It comes slowly barefoot in steps of friendship and gratitude, and it's in that rhythm that fate begins to change its tune. The peace that had settled over the farm began to bother those who thrived on stirring trouble. In Maha, when malice has nothing left to say, it invents, and that's exactly what happened. It only took someone seeing Amara Enda gathering corn in Ilio Matola's yard for the rumors to gain strength. Now she's running his house, they said at the market. The farmers blinded by that woman of shame. Within days, sharp tongues had turned a shelter into a scandal. The talk spread like fire through dry grass. Nandipa, the village's loudest neighbor, was the first to stir the men. If no one stops her, she'll take everything. She's a curse, a disgrace, a punishment. Her words found willing ears and empty hearts. One evening, gathered at Sue Dinus's store, 3 men decided to restore order to the farmer's house. Bento, the most brazen of them, declared loudly, "Tomorrow morning we go. If he doesn't throw her out, we'll take care of it ourselves." The next day, the sun had barely risen when the sound of footsteps and voices reached the gate. Alia was in the corral, and Amara was sweeping the porch, distracted. When she saw the group approaching, her body went cold. Her heavy belly tightened as if sensing danger. Aelio, noticing the commotion, stepped out with his hat in hand and a firm expression. "What do you want?" he asked. Bento Smug replied, "We want what's right. That woman can't stay here. She brings misfortune. She'll stay in your name and your family's." Aelio approached slowly, eyes locked on the group. "A man's name isn't stained by doing good. It's stained when he stays silent in the face of injustice." Bento laughed mockingly. "You're defending a sinner." Aelio raised his voice but remained calm. I'm defending the truth, and whoever comes against her comes against my home." The silence that followed was thick as mud. His words echoed firm, and the men exchanged glances, suddenly unsure. Still bent a step forward. "So you'll choose her over all of us." Aileo slipped his hands into his pockets and replied, "I'm not against anyone. I'm just standing on the right side." The wind picked up, lifting dust, and the land seemed to hold its breath. Finally, the men backed away, muttering threats. "This isn't over, farmer. The village will know you've lost your way." He watched them until the last had disappeared down the road, then turned to Amara. She stood still, face pale, eyes full of tears. "You shouldn't have," she said. "They'll take revenge." Aileo stepped closer, voice steady. "Fear is the price we pay for doing what's right. Amara, I've lived too long hiding from it." She tried to speak, but the tears came first. He rested a hand on her shoulder. "Don't cry. They only attack what they don't understand." That night, silence returned to the farm. But it was no longer the same. The air felt tense, heavy, as if every shadow held a watchful eye. Amara sat at the edge of her bed, her heart uneasy. She thought of leaving again, but the memory of Aileo's words, "Whoever comes against her comes against my home," gave her strength. She whispered a prayer, "Lord, protect this home. May the tongues of the wicked find no way in." Outside, Aileo kept watch over the yard, lantern in hand. The distant sound of crickets was broken only by the rustling of leaves. He knew the village men wouldn't rest, but inside he felt a steady peace, the kind that visits when the heart knows it's doing right. Days later, Donor Selina came to visit. Upon hearing what had happened, she shook her head. "Jealousy is a sickness with no cure. Only God knows what it can do." Aileo nodded. "They think they're defending morals, but they're losing their souls." Selina looked at Amara, gently touched her face, and said, "Child, the good that makes people uncomfortable is the one that matters most." The village, however, didn't stop. The gossip kept growing, and now they said Amara had brought bad luck. A neighbor's cow got sick. They blamed her. A man lost money gambling. He swore it was the curse of the farmer's damned woman. And so, between slander and superstition, the poison spread. But inside the farm, something resisted. Amar attended the garden. Aileo worked in silence. And despite the tension, there was a kind of peace that gossip would never understand. The peace of those who owe nothing to the world. And it was in this landscape of distrust and courage that fate prepared its hardest test. Because when good stands up to evil, heaven watches. And the same wind that carries lies will one day bring the truth back clear and just for all to see. The night began calmly, but the sky soon changed its mood. Heavy clouds rolled in from the horizon, and the wind carried the scent of rain and of foreboding. On the farm, oil lamps flickered inside the small house where Miranda was resting. Feeling a strange discomfort in her belly, her body seemed to be warning her of something. Outside, Aliomata was gathering the animals, worried about the storm on its way. When the first thunder cracked through the sky, she screamed. Aileo ran, heart pounding. He found Amara hunched over, her face pale, cold sweat streaming down her forehead. "It's starting," she said between groans, clutching her belly. He froze for a moment, taken by a fear he hadn't felt since losing his wife. But seeing the pain on Amara's face turned fear into action. "Hold on, Amara. I'll go get Donna Selina." He mounted his horse and raced down the muddy road, the rain falling hard, the wind pushing sideways. Each flash of lightning lit the path for only seconds, and the mud made the animal slip. When he reached the river, he saw the impossible. The water had overflowed. The simple wooden bridge was submerged. He tried to cross, but the current roared. "My God, help me!" he muttered. The horse reared, and Aileo knew he couldn't risk it. He turned back in a panic, despair tightening his chest. Meanwhile, Amara moaned alone, clutching the crucifix around her neck. The pain came in waves, each one stronger than the last. "Lord, give me strength. Not for me, but for him," she whispered, speaking to the child fighting to be born when Aileo burst back in, soaked and breathless. He found her kneeling near the fire, shaking. "The river I can't cross," he said, voice breaking. She looked at him, eyes filled with tears. "Then it'll have to be here." The whole house seemed to shudder with the thunder. Aileo ran to fetch clean cloths, boiled water, did what he remembered seeing Esther do when she helped women give birth on the farm. "Breathe, Amara." "Slowly," he said, trying to hide the panic. She squeezed his hand tightly, crying out through the contractions. The wind slammed the shutters. Rain slipped through the cracks, and the crash of thunder blended with the sound of life trying to be born. "Come on, my girl. You can do this," he cried, no longer noticing his own tears. Sweat ran down his face. His voice trembled. And then, with one final cry, a baby's wail broke through the air, strong, loud, clear. a cry of rebirth. Aileo held the small body wrapped in cloth and felt the world stop. The baby's face glowed in the flickering candlelight. "It's a boy," he said, voice shaking. Amara closed her eyes, exhausted, tears mixing with sweat. "Thanks be to God," she whispered. Aileo looked at her, a lump in his throat. The woman the village called cursed had just brought life into the world beneath a storm. He cut the cord with his own hands, wrapped a baby up and laid him in her arms. "He's strong like his mother," he murmured. Amara gave a faint smile, stroking the child's face. "His name will be Luan. It means light," she said, looking at the fire. Outside, the storm began to retreat as if the sky itself had calmed. The sound of the rain softened, and the wind now seemed to sing instead of roar. Aileo sat down on the floor, exhausted, watching mother and child. His eyes shone a mix of awe and faith. "You saved 2 lives today, Mr. Aileo," she said. He gave a small smile. "No, Amara, God kept the river from taking me, and he brought this boy to remind us that nothing is ever truly lost when love is real." For a while, they sat in silence. The baby slept peacefully, and the fire's glow cast soft shadows across the walls. Outside, the leaves dripped and the scent of wet earth filled the room. Amara fell asleep with her child in her arms, and Aileo remained there. Keeping vigil, he glanced at the small medallion hanging from her neck, catching the firelight. A chill ran through him. That medallion, he had seen it before. He stepped closer, heart nearly stopping. He recognized the initials etched into the metal. M. Esther Matala, his wife. He stood frozen, chest tight. The storm outside may have passed, but inside him a new one was beginning. Dot. And so on the same night, a child entered the world. Fate delivered its greatest revelation. Because sometimes it's in the chaos and fear that truth chooses to be born. Just like life, amid thunder, tears, and a miracle witnessed by no one else, yet never to be forgotten by time. Dawn was just beginning to break, casting a faint glow across the sky. When Aileo Mata finally found the courage to touch the medallion, the engraved letters M burned like old embers. Amarani stirred with the movement, held Luan tightly to her chest, and followed his gaze to the golden pendant. For a moment, Thesalence felt larger than the room itself. "Where did this come from?" Aileo asked, his voice low and firm, like someone speaking to a ghost. Amara took a deep breath. She had always known this moment would come. She just hadn't known it would hurt this much. "From a man who promised heaven and opened a hole in the ground," she said, staring into the fire's dying embers. "His name was Benio. He found me when I was weak, filled me with sweet words, gave me this medallion, said it was a family heirloom. I believed him. Belief is something we do when life hurts." Aileo closed his eyes for a brief second, his hand still suspended. "That medallion belonged to Esther Matala, my wife. She was buried with it." The words dropped like stones into the still lake of the room. Amara turned pale. "Buried," she repeated, breathless. Her eyes filled with tears, but they weren't tears of victimhood. They were tears of shame for a guilt that wasn't hers. "I didn't know. I swear to God," Aileo sat on the bench, his body weighed down by memory. 2 years ago, Esther's grave was violated. I never knew who did it. I thought it was just the cruelty of the world. But today, I see the world has a name." The fire crackled as if in agreement. Trembling, Amara shared the rest. "Benio said the medallion would protect me, that it was proof of his love. When I told him I was pregnant, he disappeared. On the day he left, he took all my savings and left me with this chain and a hollow inside me." She paused, swallowed hard. "If I had known it belonged to a woman and a dead one, I would have given it back to the wind." Aileo looked at her face, etched with exhaustion and truth. There was no deceit, only wounds. He ran his fingers along the edge of the medallion, and with a slow gesture, rested it gently back on Amara's chest, honoring the place she had unknowingly come to occupy in the story. "He didn't steal her memory," he said, his voice soft like water finding its course. "He did, and it was God who brought this medallion back," Amara sobbed. But this time, something else came with the tears' relief. "I just wanted something real to hold on to. Mr. Io, the rest of my life has been made of empty promises." Hen nodded, his face lit by the understanding that arrives when pain finds purpose. What evil takes from the just. Time returns through a road we don't expect. He looked down at Luan, sleeping peacefully, and felt the house breathe a new melody. Later, with daylight already warming the sky, Dorna Selina rushed in, calling for the child. Amara told her in hushed tones what had happened, and the midwife made the sign of the cross. Thoughtful, sometimes the world spins just to gather in one bowl what was scattered everywhere. A medallion, a mother, a widower hour, a child who understands this design. Aileo answered without hesitation, only those who don't rush to judge. Out on the porch, the breeze carried the scent of mango trees, and Aileo spoke with a peace he hadn't felt in years. Amara, from today on, this boy has a name in my mouth and shelter behind my gate. The medallion returns to the family, but not to the grave. It stays here as a living reminder that Esther's love didn't end with me. He lifted the piece, kissed it with reverence, and hung it on a nail above the table so it can watch us eat in peace. Amara lowered her head, overcome with a gratitude that needed no words. He lifted me from the ground and gave me my name back. Abilugavia Hafismil. It was destiny that pushed us together. I just stopped the cart. Outside the village would keep talking as it always did. But inside that home, truth had taken its place. The medallion, once a symbol of violation, now shone like a promise of repair. And Luan, the light born of the storm, slept in the arms the world tried to break. But that courage held whole. That morning, Ilio understood what he hadn't on the day of mourning. Love doesn't die. It shifts responsibility, and Amara, as she felt peace settle on her shoulders, realized she wasn't fate's burden. She was the thread that brought a buried story to the surface, binding a man's past to a child's hope. Because when truth finds its home, even pain learns to rest. The days that followed dawned differently on the farm. The air, once heavy with mistrust and wounds, now felt lighter. The rain had washed away not just the mud from the road, but also the bitterness that had lingered around Iliomaha and Amara, and the sun returned with sweetness. And in the yard, little Luan slept in a straw basket to the sounds of chickens clucking and distant cattle lowing. There was peace, and in that peace, a kind of forgiveness that time offers only to those who endure injustice without being corrupted by it. News of the birth spread through the village like wind through dry grass. At first the voices were mocking. The farmer's lost his mind. Some sneered, raising the shame child like he's his own. But as days passed, those same voices began to quiet. Ilio, with his head held high, introduced the baby to everyone who crossed his gate. This is Luan, son of Amara, my Pasach. The firmness in his tone, the calm in his eyes, and the respect he commanded made the whispers wither. The entire village watched in surprise the following Sunday when he walked into the small chapel of snow, Mam with Amara and the child in his arms. The church bell rang and the crowd parted to let them pass. Don Selina followed, smiling with teary eyes. Inside, Ilio knelt at the altar and in a low voice prayed, "Lord, you didn't give me what I asked for, but you gave me what I needed." His words echoed through the simple temple, and even those who had once judged him felt the weight of the silence that followed. After Mass, none deeper, the very woman who had spread the first rumors approached. Hesitant, pride wrestled with remorse. "Mr. Elio, forgive what was said in haste. We speak out of ignorance." He looked at her, tired, but without bitterness. "Time has already answered for me. Go in peace, and may blessings now come from your mouth." Amara stood beside him, silent, but the faint smile at the corner of her lips said everything. Back on the farm, life returned to its rhythm. Amara tended the house and the land, and Elio worked by her side. That year's harvests were generous, and the villagers began to say, "The curse turned into a miracle." Children came to play near the gate, curious to see the baby born in the storm, and Amara, with patience and kindness, told them stories of faith and courage, remembering the woman she once was and the strength she had discovered she truly was. One afternoon, sitting beneath the mango tree, Elio watched Luan playing with a dry branch. The boy laughed, and that laughter seemed to give sound back to things time had silenced. "You know, Amara," said the farmer, "for a long time I thought life had left me behind, but now I see. It was only waiting for me to open the right gate." She looked at him with serene eyes. "Destiny delays, but it doesn't fail." The just, he smiled. "That's what I've learned from you." The sun set in shades of gold, and the land seemed covered in promises. A group of field workers passed along the road, and this time there were no whispers, no laughter, only respectful nods. Amora's name, once spoken with scorn, now carried reverence. The woman of faith, they said, the one who faced the world with a clean heart. One night, Ilio climbed the small hill behind the farm. He carried the medallion that had hung in the wall. Sitting at the edge of the field, he looked up at the sky full of stars. "Esther," he murmured, "if you can still hear me, know that love didn't die with you. It just changed shape. It's there now, sleeping in the arms of the woman the world nearly broke, and in the laughter of a child who gave me back the will to live." He made the sign of the cross, placed the medallion on the soil, and with a simple gesture planted a rose bush over it. "May forgiveness bloom." The next morning, when Amara found the freshly planted rose bush, she understood without needing an explanation. She knelt, touched the earth, and whispered, "Thank you." My soul as the debris blew gently, and the scent of the first blossoms filled the yard. As months passed, the farm became a symbol of respect. The people who had once been cruel now came seeking advice from the farmer, and help from Amara, who never turned anyone away. "Those who have known the hunger of the soul don't let others go cold," she often said. Luann grew up surrounded by love, learning that dignity is the greatest inheritance a person can leave. And so, under the same sun that had once made Amara stagger from exhaustion, she walked again, strong, proud, serene. She no longer pushed a cart of bricks, but carried in her arms the fruit of her faith, and in her eyes the certainty that true goodness needs no applause. It only takes a gesture, a hand outstretched, a cart that stops along the road for destiny to change, and divine justice to unfold in its own time. Because in the end, it's always the quiet love that conquers the noise of the world. If this story touched your heart, let us know where you're watching from. Leave a comment below. We'd love to hear from you. Don't forget to like the video, share it with your friends and family, and subscribe to the channel. That really helps us keep bringing you real and emotional stories like this one. Thank you for being part of our